Let's see. Gun vise, $99.99. Scope lapping system, $99.99. Reticle level system, $54.99. Brownell aerosol degreaser, $19.99. Thread locker number 242 medium, $17.95. Let's see, and that I double checked that. No matter how many times I go, it comes up to $292.91 plus $26.50 for shipping. Honey?
What?
Do we have $319.41? It's just a one-time thing.
For what?
Well, I just need to get some scope mounting stuff. It's I'll be able to use this on guns for as long as I have scopes, but...
You've got to be kidding me. You just spent over $1,800 for the rifle, the scope, not to mention all the ammo and the cleaning stuff you bought recently.
Oh, boy. But, honey, I really need this in order to go shooting.
I don't know where we're going to get that money from, hon. I just paid the propane guy $700 to fill the tank.
Oh, man. So, what about next month?
Well, we'll talk about it.
Oof. Okay.
All right, love you.
Love you too.
Sorry.
It's okay. You know, if you're willing, there's somebody out there willing to separate you from your money. Stay tuned and I'm going to show you how to mount a scope without costing a dime. Well, maybe a couple of dimes. You know, if a statement in a catalog says that you have to have two devices to line up your scope rings, that assumes a premise. That assumes that the scope rings need to be lined up, that they would not otherwise be lined up without this centering device. If I told you that they need to be lapped, that assumes a premise. That assumes that the rings are not correctly made to begin with. Or it assumes that they need to somehow, by lapping, it can true up any inaccuracy. There are premises there that I always like to attack the premise. When somebody's trying to sell me anything, the very first thing I do is I ask the simple question, why? The premise is absolutely invalid. We're no longer, you know, scope mounting is it's almost a little bit of a high term. It's more like scope attaching. Most of the mounting has been accomplished for us at the factory these days. We don't have guns anymore that are not drilled and tapped or dovetailed or whatever to accept a scope. Virtually all scopes, all rifles on the market now come with some manner of affixing a scope. If I show you this rifle right here, I've got four screw holes. They're 6x48 gun screw holes. That's a thread pattern which is peculiar to the gunsmithing industry. You won't find it in your hardware store, but that's a very flat pitch. The pitch of the threads is very fine, 48 threads per inch, which means that with an inclined surface, a thread is an inclined plane, and an inclined plane is a form of levering something upward or downward. 48 pitch screw has a very flat pitch. In other words, it's not inclined to back out. Once it's screwed in tight, barring something really unusual, it's not inclined to simply back its way out because it's a very, very reduced inclined plane. If I look at those screw holes and ask myself logically how they got there, they didn't get there by somebody with a Dremel tool or somebody with a Milwaukee drill. They got there because in the factory they have very precise machining equipment, the same sort of equipment which constructed the gun with quite a bit of precision, means that they we're able to place those screw holes precisely down the receiver. There's no indication that there's no reason to believe that those screw holes would be in any way crooked or off center or zigzag or anything else. That would be a rather ridiculous premise. They're done with CNC machinery most often these days, or repeating drill press systems. Whatever it is that they use, I can guarantee you that it's not homegrown on your kitchen table stuff. It's very precise. Even if you were to go to a gunsmith with an older gun that didn't have the receiver drilled and tapped, in all likelihood he's going to have very sophisticated machinery and tooling, which is going to guide his drill in line down that receiver and place each hole precisely. He has to, because the other problem is if he doesn't do that, then he can't mount the mounts, because in many cases a one-piece mount, the 4 holes have to line up, or otherwise they're just simply not going to go on, crooked or otherwise. So the next premise is that the rings themselves would be out of kilter. That somehow or another, that once they've been mounted on perfectly straight screw holes, that somehow the mounts would be somehow off kilter. These are mounts which are made, these whether they're made by Weaver or Warren or whomever they're made by, they're made by a controlled process by which every one is either machined through the same machining process, cast through the same casting process, or whatever it is. But they are always done exactly the same. If they're made by reputable companies, we can certainly assume that their quality control is what it should be. It would be so. Therefore, the premise that these would add to some sort of incorrect pointing of that scope down range, you'd have to be able to prove that premise. So far we've got the rifle appears to be straight and in line. You've got the mounting holes straight and in line. You've got the mounts themselves straight and in line. Now, what about the scope rings? These, again, they're not manufactured one at a time on a kitchen table. These are manufactured through a continued process which goes on throughout the day in the factory, and there's every reason to believe that those rings are precisely made, or at least made exactly the same as one another. So by what means do we have to have some sort of a system that establishes a center line? If they're not already centered, send the gun back to the factory and have them center the gun, because you can't center something which is crooked to begin with. Many of the other premises fall in line like that. They're straw men. Reductio ad absurdum is the Latin term for it. In other words, by an invalid premise, you can somehow or another establish a logical conclusion. It's impossible. Kingdoms have been built on invalid straw men. So don't fall for all this nonsense. And certainly you don't have to buy a lot of gimmickry and gadgetry. That's all part of this. You know, at one time, not very long ago, and it continues today, you can still go to most gun stores where they sell scopes, and if they have a resident gunsmith or some clerk who's capable of doing it, they'll mount a scope for you, either for the cost of the scope as part of their service, or they'll mount it for a few dollars. But if you're like most Americans, you like to do things yourself, you're do-it-yourself, you like to have that pride of knowing that you put it on yourself and did it right. I'll be very honest with you. You know, you can mount a scope on your lap. It doesn't require any particular instruments. It doesn't require any particular expertise or anything. And don't let anybody ever con you into believing that you need to do anything extraordinary or have some sort of extraordinary knowledge and skill to mount a scope. That's nonsense. As I say, it's largely a matter of attaching the scope and leveling it. And I'll show you very quickly that the premise about needing a leveling system on a scope is that it's impossible to do it without the leveling system that costs $39.95 or whatever it is. You know, your eye is the greatest leveler in the world, but I'll show you how you can do it with even greater precision than that without spending a dime with things that you have around the house. Okay, let's take a look at what we have. Here's all the stuff that you need, and then some. As far as degreaser goes, the best degreaser that you can possibly get for the cheapest amount of bang for your buck, it's just plain old mineral spirits. Mineral spirits or paint thinner, they're one and the same. Anytime you go to the hardware store, if you're buying mineral spirits, check the price of the paint thinner. If you're buying paint thinner, check the price of the mineral spirits, because they're exactly the same product with a different label, and oftentimes with vastly different prices. They'll say what they are. In other words, the mineral spirits can will say that it's paint thinner, and the paint thinner can will say on the back that it's mineral spirits. So same thing. That will clean off anything that's on any oils and contaminants on your gun and your mounts. Most of the time, you can get it all done with simple. You can go to your medicine cabinet and grab a bottle of isopropyl alcohol. That'll generally get the work done too. It's not a big mysterious thing. I'm trying to debunk a lot of this stuff. It's not a great mystery. Anybody with common sense can do the job. Excuse me. It's good to have, if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated than simple laptop scope mounting. You can have a square. Now it can either be this sort of square here, but you don't have to have one of those. You can use a Bible, you can use a book that you've been reading, you can use the Cabela's catalog that you would have bought all this stuff with. Anything that's square, that suffices, and I'll show you what I mean. A piece of cleaning cloth, or shop towel or rag, lint-free. It has to be lint-free. Naturally, whatever your chosen scope rings and mounts are, they're all good. I haven't seen any bad ones. If you wanna check the depth of your screw holes, sometimes screw holes are different depths, and they have different size screws that have to go into them. Otherwise, you jam your bolt up. So, just a toothpick and a Sharpie or a pencil is all you need for that, and some Q-tips to clean your screw holes out. Screwdriver with the appropriate tip. This is a Torx bit tip, or most of the time now, the scope mount will come with an Allen head wrench with a Torx bit on the end, or a regular hex head bit. Just to let you know, there are two different types of screw threads, screw diameters found in the scope mounting trade. There's the most common for mounting the base is 6x48. 648 is the thread pitch for mounting most bases. Once in a while you see 840s. 840 is most typically used for the actual scope to put the scope rings together. Sometimes over the years other companies have used 8x40 for the actual bases on the top of the receiver. 648 will hold the heaviest recoil. You can mount the heaviest scope on the heaviest recoiling gun with 648 screws, but a lot of people now think that 840s are necessary in order to do it with a 30mm scope. It makes no difference whatsoever. Okay, this is the same vise I use for everything. It's just a Wilton 40-pound vise, machine vise. I've got the barrel locked in securely, and over here you can see I've got a simple tri-square. You can use any kind of inexpensive square. You don't have to buy a square. You can take a book. Does the same thing. You can take in the extremity that your bench or your table is not square or level or whatever it is. It's for whatever reason it's lumpy. You can always resort to a simple a simple level. And a level has a plumb. This direction is plumb, this direction is level. So you can establish plumb by aligning the screw holes. There's always screw holes on virtually every rifle, and if there's not, you can simply find the tangent spot at the top and bottom where the circle, where the radius becomes tangent, and line it up on that with just a pencil mark on both sides. But don't make it complicated. You don't need to have any kind of leveling devices that you screw on and things that cost money. Begin by cleaning everything off. Any mating part should be cleaned and wiped down. Now you can use, this is the mineral spirits or paint thinner, and as I say, they're one and the same. So if you happen to go to the hardware store and one is cheaper than the other, buy the cheap one. The other thing is, and that takes a little bit, that takes a few minutes to dry. Alternatively, you can do what I've found is just as effective, is to use plain isopropyl alcohol that you can get your local supermarket. It dries faster. It'll remove virtually everything. If you have a gun that has more noxious junk on it than alcohol will get off, you probably should stop doing something to your gun, because there should be nothing on your gun that is that difficult to get off. Certainly you should be using no lubricants that are that tenacious. They're gumming. Next thing, you take your screw holes and clean those out with, we'll use alcohol because it's just a little quicker. You don't have to go crazy about this now. The simple fact that the alcohol is running down those threads is sufficient to really clean them up. Clean up your bases the same way. Clean up your rings, all the mating surfaces of your rings, and clean up your scope tube so that there's no oil or anything that's going to interfere with the friction. Because everything should be nice and tight when you get done. Okay, having done that, we want to establish how the bases go on. Now, if you're using loopholed standard two-piece bases, they're going to have a prescribed front and back in most cases. So that's already been figured out for you. Determine which ones go on the front and back, and also if they're two-piece, make sure you have the orientation correct. I see some people who are, unfortunately, they're just not intelligent enough to know that when their bolt doesn't come up, that they need to turn the base around. If the bolt doesn't come up and the manufacturer has been selling that scope base for that rifle for the last 85 years, there's no defect in the base, it's the defect in the mounting. So make sure that you have it oriented correctly so that it doesn't interfere with your bolt. And on some rifles, the receivers will be dissimilar height in the front and back, most notably Mauser receivers and Model 70 Winchester receivers. They have different heights on the back and different shapes. So if you're using a one-piece base, it'll go without saying, which you just need to establish that you got the front and the back. But with two-piece bases, you have to establish which base goes on the front and which goes in the back. Screws are not always the same length. If you buy high-grade bases like loophole bases, the screws will be sized to fit the depth of the hole. In other words, the length of the shank of the screw will match the depth of the hole in the receiver, and they're not always the same. Remington screw holes on a Model 700, the screw holes will be different height because the depth to the bottom where they protrude from the other side. These screw holes usually go all the way through the receiver and come out. You don't want to have screws interfering with your bolt. But if you want to establish which ones what depth, simply take a screw, your toothpick and a Sharpie, and mark it there and then check it in another hole and go to the bottom and see if it's different. And in this case, that would be different by, it looks like a good 1/16 of an inch. So if I had longer screws and shorter screws, that would tell me which end should be in what. And sometimes they're different even in the pairing. Sometimes the screw where the bolt lug occurs will be a different height, maybe shorter. So again, establish that. Make sure you have that correct, because you don't want to be running a screw into your bolt and binding it up. Always assume that the tops and bottoms are mated. Very frequently, they're polished by hand together on a polishing wheel and ground together to establish a nice smooth mating surface right here. Whatever way they come packaged, by if they're blister packaged in the factory packaging, be absolutely sure you don't move them around. You want to keep them together. I always put a witness mark on them. You can do it simply with a pencil, and it will show up even on blued steel. Simply put a pencil line across, and if I do on the other base, I should say on the other ring, I put 2, and just do it on one side, and that will tell me which top goes to which bottom, and it will tell me the correct orientation, because neither should they be turned. They have to be on the same, tops go to the same bottoms, and they have to be oriented in the same direction. So make sure you keep those oriented correctly. There are some rings that they're mass produced in such a way that they're all exactly the same, but Ruger still produces theirs with mating tops and bottoms, as do quite a few other companies. Seiko rings can be assumed to be mating top and bottom as well. So you don't want to turn them around, because if you turn them around, very frequently you'll have difficulty getting the inside of the hole won't be correctly milled. Okay, so we'll get these bases put on. Now, in this particular instance, both bases are exactly the same, and I can orient them either with the slot both in the middle. I can orient it with the slot both facing the front, or I can face it with the slots to the outside. I can, in any combination. And the reason being is that scope tubes vary greatly in the amount of distance there is between the turret and the adjustment ring, or the turret and the bell housing. Aesthetically, they should be somewhere centered so the turret is located between the rings in the most pleasing circumstance, and without crowding this end of the scope where the adjusting ring is, and without crowding this end of the scope where there may be a bell on a larger power scope. So in this situation, I want to turn them. This is all up to you. You have to use your own. Figuring. Actually, if I turn this one here like this, it gives me a little bit more central positioning, and also I have a little bit more latitude. So we'll clean those up, and we're going to mount them. I like to use a standard screwdriver style instrument rather than using a Allen wrench. Allen wrenches are fine, but they're just a little bit slow to manipulate. It's a lot easier to just spin them in like this. Don't go all the way to the bottom. We're just going to keep them loose. Now, should I use Loctite? That's all up to you. I've mounted screws in rifles through the years. Over the last 45 years, I've mounted with Loctite, and I've mounted them without Loctite. I've mounted them with gasket cement. I've gone all sorts of things. And to be very honest with you, it doesn't make a hoot of difference. These screws here, as I mentioned before, these are 6/48 pitch. It's a very flat pitch, and it's not inclined to unravel. They're not gonna unscrew during vibration or firing. So I find that in terms of being able to take them apart later on without having any grief and without worrying about snapping a screw, I just simply put them down with standard pressure. Now, use your fingertip to press down and wiggle to make sure that these bottoms, there's a contour on this receiver, and there's usually a contour on most receivers of some sort. You want to make sure that everything is wiggling down and has come to a firm stop, and then turn your screws in. Start them in snugly at first so that one doesn't cant the other side, and then just turn them in with reasonable torque. When I say reasonable torque, I'm saying you don't want to be bulging your bicep muscles. You just want to turn that. You just want to turn that in until it's reasonably tight, and it doesn't. When it doesn't want to move anymore, you're tight enough. You don't have to keep on winding it down. A good torque wrench is if you have one of these and you're turning it. You don't want to get to the point where this is beginning to bend. You want to turn it down until common sense tells you that you've reached the end of the limits that this wrench will take. Again, now we'll do the same thing with this one. You see there's a little bit of wiggle, so I keep on pressing it down until all wiggle is removed and tighten it. If you want to use Loctite, no harm whatsoever, but use medium strength Loctite. Don't, by any means, don't ever use high strength Loctite, because those screws will never come out. You'll certainly have them in there forever and ever, and that may not be what you want to have. These are detachable, and if you ever go to sell a rifle, you may want to get those off there. Okay, we've got that done. Now we're just going to put our rings together. Establish which way you want to have them facing. Most rings have got they've got different appearances on one side or the other. I consider this to be the front of the rifle. This is the front side, the finished side of the rifle. Therefore, I like to have the most pleasing side facing me. For my gun, I call this the most pleasing side. Somebody might call this the most pleasing side. It's your option, entirely up to you. So, having determined that, and they're cleaned up, I'm just going to simply put them around the scope and loosely attach the screws, top and bottom. And I don't want to tighten them up so much that they will turn. And I'll do that off camera so as not to bore you, and we'll be right back. Okay, these are split rings, vertically split rings, and the manner that vertically split rings are usually put on is to place them on loosely on the scope first. Right now, the scope can turn inside those rings. Be sure you orient your windage turret to the right-hand side and your elevation turret upward. You'd be surprised how many times I've seen people mount their turrets in the wrong direction. They mount them so that the windage is up and the elevation is to the right, and you've got your serial number facing this side, and your beautiful logo looking at the receiver where nobody can see it. So orient it in the correct direction and establish the correct eye relief. And then once you've done that, and you want to push one ring at a time, you want to push the ring forward until it stops in that slot. This is an imperative that many people don't follow. You want to be sure that base is firmly against the forward, in other words, this edge right here of the base. Wind that in firmly. Now, why is that? Recoil is in this direction. Inertia means that anything at rest tends to remain at rest, and everything in motion tends to remain in motion. So the scope tends to remain at rest. It doesn't want to go with the rifle. So it stays in the forward direction as the rifle is coming back. So accommodate that by placing the ring. Make sure you have the ring firmly pressed up against the forward edge of that slot. To do the same thing with the rear ring, make sure your rings are loose enough. Now, the last thing you want to do is tighten up the rings while you're doing this, because once you tighten those rings up, you can no longer allow that ring. See, it slides back and forth. So click it right up against the front, and if it's a split ring, make sure both sides are firmly against the front, and tighten it down. You don't have to go crazy with torque on that. These hold on to that base by themselves. Now, place it so that it's positioned aesthetically. First of all, go from there, and then you want to check your eye relief. Put the rifle up to your shoulder, and I'm not going to do that on camera. There's no need to. You can understand that. Simply place your rifle up to your shoulder. The scope is firm. It won't slide, but it won't slide easily, but it's firm enough so that you can move the rifle around. So put it up to your shoulder. Establish the eye relief. In other words, the distance from the scope, the ocular lens, to your eye. Make sure it should always be as far forward as you comfortably can make it. And if you're establishing it for a fall hunting rifle, put your fall hunting coat on and see how that goes, because that's going to change it by 3/4 of an inch or more, perhaps. So put your fall hunting coat on and see how it goes with that. You want to have that forward, especially if you're using a heavy recoiling rifle. Now, after you've done that, we want to get the crosshair straight. You don't need to have any fancy instrumentation. We've already established that the rifle is plumb. In other words, that the stock itself is plumb up and down, and that places the receiver across its top level. I don't have anything here that I can rest across the rings or anything like that to establish a level. The rifle itself is round, so I can't establish a level, so I simply established it with the plumb of the two stock screws. So that means that everything else is square to it. In order to establish the level of this right here, it's the easiest thing in the world. Just simply have a level surface where you're looking. In my basement here, I've got a pegboard mounted at one end of the wall, so I simply look at the pegboard and I just turn the scope until it lines up with the holes on the pegboard. If you need to, just put some masking tape, or use the top of a chair, or use your windowsill, or whatever it is that happens to be out there. You can put a couple of boxes on the floor, tall boxes on the floor. As long as you don't have to line it up precisely with the horizontal crosshair. You can certainly tell when they're parallel. And also, too, most scopes are going to have a vertical crosshair. So use the vertical crosshair against a vertical surface, such as a window frame, the edge of a wall, a door, or whatever. Or place a box on the floor and line it up with that. But that's all you need to do. You don't have to take a level and put it across the top of the scope turret. You don't have to buy any instrumentation to clamp on. You don't have to have special magnetic devices and all that nonsense. Again, they're establishing premises that are a little bit foolish. The premise is that you can't make it level in some other fashion. In this case, I simply can line it up with a known surface, which in this case is my wall at a distance. So now that I've established my level of the scope, it's just a matter of tightening things down. And I'm using the method that a mechanic would use for tightening down the head of an engine. In other words, just a little at a time on each screw, using similar torque. So you want to, with these split rings, I want to get the bottoms. I want to get the bottoms tightened first. And then the tops. And keep on moving around and tightening as you go. Do not torque these. Do not torque these. When I say torque them, do not reef them home. You know, these rings will hold with tremendous pressure with the least amount of with the least amount of torque on those screws. You don't want to be crushing and distorting your scope tube. Now, I didn't use a lapping device for this. That's about the biggest horror show that I've ever seen. To paraphrase President Ronald Reagan when he was in New Hampshire here many years ago, and he said, I paid for this microphone. Well, I paid for these rings. The last thing I want to do is take an abrasive substance to the inside of those rings and start scraping away and planing off that anodizing or bluing or whatever fine finish is placed in that. Not only that, but the premise is that, as I said earlier, the premise is that these are not in alignment with one another. That's an impossible premise, given the fact that these 4 holes were precision drilled by precision equipment at a factory that has the facility to do everything within thousandths of an inch. It's an impossible premise when each of these rings are manufactured exactly the same as one after another, and that the bases were manufactured exactly the same one after another. The notion that there is a dissimilar orientation to these rings is the most foolish concept I've ever heard. And if you've got rings that are the type that scar or otherwise abuse your scope, get a different set of rings, because no good quality ring will in any way harm or scar or dent your scope tube. Quality rings are machine made with fabulous quality control to be sure that the mating surfaces, top and bottom, have no protrusions inside. And this is one of the biggest reasons why people damage their scope tubes, is to go back to what I mentioned earlier, to caution you to be sure that you orient the tops and bottoms of the rings the way they were from the factory, the way they were screwed together at the factory. Once you've done that, you've eliminated all possibility of error. So if you happen to have one of those, if you're grinding your teeth and you just went out and bought one of those scope mounting kits that cost you $135 or something, put it up on gunbroker.com or eBay, and somebody would be glad to buy it from you, and they can in turn grind their teeth and they'll sell it, and maybe we can get that scope mounting kit to go around and make several thousands of dollars for the American economy. Let's mount Ruger rings on a Ruger receiver. I've seen an awful lot of controversy about this system. A lot of people are having issues with looseness, with scopes coming loose after they fired a few rounds, and they can't seem to get them tight, and naturally causes frustration. And they want to throw the gun away or throw the rings away, have them drilled and tapped, and all sorts of things. The issue is all about how they're mounted. Now I'm going to show you how to do that so that you absolutely have no concerns whatsoever with loosening. Whether this is a 458 Winchester Magnum or a Mini 14 or your Ruger Red Hawk or Black Hawk, whatever it is, if you use the Ruger scope rings on the Ruger receiver, you'll have no issues of loosening if you do it the way I show you. So let's draw in a little bit closer. On these systems, you have right here, let me get my little brooch here so I can point it out. Right here you have this crescent-shaped cut on the side. That crescent-shaped cut mates with the this fixture right here on the base, on the base portion of the rings, and this crescent-shaped cut here mates with this part of the fixture right here. Now, its looseness occurs, or I should say loosening occurs, when the center line of this right here is not in the center line of the two crescent cuts on the side of the sides of the receiver. If that base system is not seated fully in both cuts, one will fight against the other. The front and the rear will fight against one another to get seated, and one of them is going to win within about 3 or 4 shots, and the whole thing is going to loosen up, and you'll literally these will be finger loose. They'll be spinning loose. So how do you fix that? Very simple. Take 1 drop of oil. You can use anything you want. You can use mineral oil. You can use let me back off a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Just a drop of oil on those crescent cuts on both sides, and also on the threads, and on both sides of. Actually, just watch the oil will be everywhere. You can wipe off any excess. You don't want to have oil slathered all over the place. It's not necessary. But what this is going to do is allow this to come, especially when you have stainless steel, has got a little bit of a texture to it, and it somewhat resists seating down tightly, because it's not quite as smooth as the blued steel. So first of all, place it on with that part of the scope ring, the base part of the scope ring engaging that slot. Loosen them up until now. You want to. This is the most important thing of all. Tighten that ring with your finger, not with a screwdriver, with your finger. As you draw it up close, as you draw it up, wiggle as you turn. As you turn that thumb screw with your thumb, wiggle it hard from side to side, rotate it in this direction until everything seats. Don't push it in just one direction. This is one time when you don't push against that forward slot. That everything will come together if you wiggle that. And once you get it into position, take a heavy screwdriver. So with a flat bladed wide bit screwdriver, finish the process by turning that in, and the oil on that thread will allow that thread to tighten very nicely, and you can hear that thread climbing into position. That noise that you hear means that it's really tight. Okay, don't overdo it. Whatever you do, don't put any pliers or anything on that nicely knurled nut and mess that up. Doing the same thing with the front ring, and I've already put a drop of oil on those places that I showed you. The same thing. Position that and finish it with your screwdriver, and again, once you get that nut turned in tightly and you can hear it itch finally into position, that's dead tight. Now you want to clean up your rings, clean up your scope, have it ready to be mounted, place it into position, and simply apply the screws. Be sure to observe clearance on the front of your turret. be sure to observe clearance on the back of your scope. And when you're putting in the screws, make sure you put them in with alternating torque, usually crisscross pattern. Go from this one here to the back one on this side to the front one on this side, to the back one on this side to the front one on this side, and alternate the torque around, but don't endeavor to put a crush fit on it. When you get it to the point where it's just finger tight, do your adjustments fore and aft, and line your reticle up with whatever object is your vertical or horizontal object that will give you your true plumb and level, and orient everything the way you want, and finally tighten it down. So that's it. I'm not gonna finish it up from here. I think you understand from this point what's going on. Good luck, good shooting, and God bless.